For 7 years, no one dared to walk near the old maintenance shed at Riverside Elementary. They called it superstition, bad memory, the place where a little girl disappeared and was never seen again. Time passed. Teachers changed. The whispers faded. Until one spring morning, a police K-9 named Rex was assigned to the school's safety program. He was steady, calm, disciplined, the kind of dog who didn't make mistakes. But that morning, something called to him. He broke formation and sprinted toward the shed. Officer Lewis barely had time to react before the dog began to dig, claws slicing the earth, barking like his heart was breaking. The noise stopped the playground cold. When the dust cleared, there it was, a child's sneaker, pink and faded, with a butterfly sticker peeling at the edges. Every teacher who'd been there 7 years ago knew what it meant. The missing girl had finally been found, not by chance but by loyalty. And for the first time in years, the wind carried not whispers of fear, but of truth. It began like any other Tuesday in the sleepy town of Riverside, Georgia. The kind of morning where sunlight slipped lazily through oak branches and laughter drifted across the playground like birdsong. The air smelled faintly of chalk, grass, and cafeteria pancakes. Teachers leaned on the wooden benches by the fence, chatting idly about lesson plans and weekend plans, while children squealed over jump ropes, tag, and rubber balls bouncing against sun-warmed asphalt. For a brief moment, everything was still ordinary, so heartbreakingly normal that no one noticed the dog's change in posture. Rex, the German shepherd from the local K-9 unit, stood near the hopscotch lines beside Officer Lewis, his handler. The morning was part of the school's new Safety and Trust program, a community event where kids could meet real police dogs, learn about bravery, and maybe pet a hero. Rex had been the highlight of the day. Smart, calm, obedient, the kind of animal that radiated discipline and loyalty. But then, in the middle of a round of applause after a trick demonstration, Rex's ears flicked forward, his tail lowered, his breathing changed. Something invisible shifted inside him, like a cord pulled tight. Lewis felt it instantly. "Rex?" he said softly, his voice almost lost beneath the hum of children's voices. The dog didn't answer. He was listening, nose quivering, eyes narrowing toward the far end of the playground, where the grass turned to gravel and the forgotten maintenance shed stood like an afterthought of the past. Then, without warning, Rex moved. It wasn't a trot. It wasn't curiosity. It was instinct, pure, sharp, and unstoppable. The leash slipped through Lewis's fingers before he could react. "Rex, heel!" he barked, but the command fell flat against the rising wind. The German shepherd shot across the field, a streak of tan and black muscle cutting through the laughter. The sound of his squatton, claws against asphalt, echoed like urgent gunfire. Children stopped mid-sentence, startled by the sudden outburst. A red rubber ball rolled into the grass, forgotten. "Stay where you are," one teacher shouted, her voice trembling. Rex's growl ripped through the air, a deep, guttural warning that didn't sound like the friendly K-9 from 5 minutes ago. He reached the edge of the playground, nose pressed to the earth, then began digging with a kind of desperation that chilled the watching crowd. Dirt flew, pebbles scattered. His paws worked furiously, as if the ground itself were trying to hide something he refused to let stay buried. "Rex, off! Leave it!" Lewis shouted, sprinting toward him. But the dog didn't stop. His barks came faster, louder, sharp and echoing, slicing through the morning like sirens. A little girl screamed. Another child began to cry. Even the birds seemed to vanish from the trees. Lewis grabbed the leash but couldn't pull him away. "What's gotten into you?" he muttered, straining. But Rex kept going. The soil beneath his paws darker now, damp. His nose pressed low, nostrils flaring. A low whine rose in his throat, half grief, half fury. Then the earth shifted. Lewis froze. The movement was small, barely noticeable, just a faint dip of soil collapsing inward. A moment later, something pink surfaced. The world stopped breathing. It was a small shoe, faded fabric, torn laces, a butterfly sticker peeling from the side. The color, once bright bubblegum, had turned pale with time, the way memory fades but never disappears. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The silence was heavier than the Georgia heat. Then someone whispered, "Dear God, that's a child's shoe." Officer Lewis crouched, brushing the dirt away carefully with trembling hands. The shoe was tiny, second-grade tiny. His fingers brushed a name written faintly in marker on the inner tongue. S. Lane. Lewis's throat went dry. The name hit him like a ghost. Behind him, Mrs. Carlton, one of the teachers, gasped audibly. "No, it can't be." Her hand flew to her mouth. "That's Sophie's. That's Sophie Lane's shoe." Murmurs rippled through the playground. Some of the younger teachers exchanged confused glances, but the older ones, the ones who had been here 7 years ago, knew exactly what that name meant. Sophie Lane, the girl who vanished from Riverside Elementary without a trace. The story every parent whispered about, but no one could discuss without lowering their voice. Lewis looked up, his chest tightening. Around him, the children had gone completely still. One of them was crying softly, clutching a jump rope. Another stared blankly, not understanding why the grown-ups suddenly looked so frightened. Principal Hammond came running from the main building, breathless. "What's happening?" Lewis met his eyes. "Call the precinct," he said hoarsely. "Now!" By the time backup arrived, the playground had turned into a surreal scene. Police tape fluttering in the spring breeze, parents rushing in panic, reporters already gathering by the gates. Rex sat beside the small hole he had dug, chest rising and falling rapidly. He wasn't barking anymore. He just sat there, staring at the shoe, occasionally letting out a low, mournful whine that sounded almost human. Officer Lewis knelt beside him, one hand on his collar, voice low. "You found her, didn't you, boy?" Rex's ears twitched, eyes locked on the dirt. Around them, the once bright playground was unrecognizable. The sunlight that had painted everything gold now felt harsh, cruel. Teachers held one another, some crying quietly. Others ushered the children back inside, whispering reassurances they didn't believe. A mother arrived, breath hitching when she saw the shoe on the evidence cloth. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips and whispered, "Sophie." Even though she wasn't Sophie's mother, she was just another parent who had lost sleep for years, wondering what really happened that day. In the distance, sirens approached, slow and solemn. Officer Lewis stayed crouched beside Rex, who still wouldn't look away from the spot. Every instinct told him that this was more than luck. It was purpose. Something had drawn the dog here, something unseen, like memory calling through the soil. Principal Hammond stood behind the yellow tape, pale and shaking. 7 years, he murmured. 7 years, and it was right here all along. No one answered him. When the forensics team arrived, their gloves caught the morning light as they carefully unearthed the soil. Rex's eyes followed every movement, and when they lifted the tiny shoe into an evidence bag, he whimpered, a deep, aching sound that made even the officers go still. Lewis's vision blurred for a second. The laughter that had filled this place an hour ago felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The playground was no longer a playground. It was a crime scene, and a memorial, and a confession from the earth itself. The spring breeze carried the scent of dust and sorrow. Parents clung to their children tighter than before. The teachers avoided each other's eyes, as if they all shared a guilt they couldn't name. And through it all, Rex sat perfectly still, ears perked, head slightly tilted toward the wind, as if listening for something no one else could hear. Maybe he was. Because deep under the surface, in the dark silence where the soil still held secrets, a story had begun to stir again. And the first voice to answer was a bark. Blue lights flickered across the playground like restless ghosts. Principal Hammond stood with his phone pressed to his ear, voice trembling as he spoke to the dispatcher. "Yes, Riverside Elementary. We found something. No, not a person. His voice cracked. A child's shoe, possibly connected to the Lane case." He hung up and stared across the field at Moisson, the maintenance shed, its shadow stretching long under the setting sun. Around it, yellow tape fluttered in the breeze. Officers moved quietly, their radios muted, their eyes cautious. The air smelled faintly of turned earth and rust. Officer Lewis kept a firm grip on Rex's collar, but the dog wouldn't settle. Every few seconds, Rex leaned forward, pawing at the same patch of soil he had unearthed earlier, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His fur bristled with a kind of tension that felt mournful. "Easy, boy," Lewis murmured, kneeling beside him. "They've got it now." But Rex didn't care about police tape or protocol. His paw scraped the ground again, claws clicking against a stone. His nose dipped into the dirt, snuffling, tracing something no one else could see. The forensics team exchanged glances. "Let him lead," one of them whispered. The air grew heavier as the lead technician brushed away another layer of earth. The soft rasp of the trowel cut through the silence. Then a faint glint, something metallic, caught the light. "Wait," the tech said, kneeling lower. "We've got something else." They cleared the soil carefully, inch by inch. Officer Lewis held Rex back, though the dog trembled with focus. When the dirt finally fell away, a small silver locket emerged, dulled with age, the chain tangled in roots. The tech wiped it clean. Everyone leaned closer. The engraving was faint but still legible. "To Sophie, with love, Mom." Lewis felt a lump rise in his throat. Principal Hammond turned away, covering his mouth. The name was no longer just a memory. It was proof, buried and waiting. A heavy silence fell over the playground. Even Rex seemed to sense the gravity of it. His body sank lower to the ground, tail tucked. The only sound was his breathing, slow, heavy, mournful, as if the earth itself had started to breathe again after 7 years of holding its tongue. By the time the sun disappeared, the school grounds looked nothing like they had that morning. The laughter, the jump ropes, the soccer balls, gone. All that remained were shadows and whispers. That night, Riverside wasn't the same town. Porch lights glowed later than usual. Police cruisers passed every few hours, their silent lights painting the sleepy streets red and blue. In diners and front porches, people spoke in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders like guilt had weight. "Did you hear? They found her shoe. Her shoe after all these years. You think it's really her? Who else could it be? It's happening again." Old fears were exhumed along with the evidence. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Fathers checked locks twice before bed. The story of Sophie Lane, the bright-eyed second grader who vanished without a trace, crawled back into everyone's mind, and with it came the ache of what they had buried. The not knowing, the helplessness, the shame. The next morning, classroom 2B was unusually quiet. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping the floor in pale gold. The children whispered, their voices thin and nervous. Even the crayons seemed to squeak softer against the paper. At the back of the room sat Eli Carter, head bent over his desk. He wasn't drawing dinosaurs or superheroes like the others. His page was filled with shadows. The outline of a shed, the crooked shape of trees, and behind them, a tall, thin man holding a ring of keys. His pencil strokes were firm, almost too sure for an 8-year-old. His lips moved slightly, whispering something to himself. Mrs. Carlton, the young teacher with kind eyes and tired hands, noticed him from across the room. She walked slowly toward him, crouching beside his desk. "That's an interesting picture, Eli," she said softly. "What's that building?" "The one behind the playground," Eli said, not looking up. "Where Rex was digging." Mrs. Carlton's stomach tightened. "And who's that man?" He hesitated, pressing harder with the pencil. The graphite snapped. He stared at the broken tip, then whispered, "He had keys." "Keys?" "Lots of them. They jingle when he walks." Mrs. Carlton frowned gently. "Did you see someone like that before?" Eli shook his head. "No." A pause. "She told me." Mrs. Carlton's voice caught. "She?" Eli looked up then, eyes wide and too calm for his age. "Sophie." The name sent a shiver through her. "Sophie. Told you?" He nodded once. "Last night." Mrs. Carlton felt her pulse quicken. "In a dream?" Eli's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, she was sitting by my window. She said the dog found her, that she's not scared anymore." Mrs. Carlton didn't speak for a long moment. The clock ticked in the background, impossibly loud. "Eli," she said carefully, "did you tell your mom or dad about this?" He shook his head. "They wouldn't believe me." His tone was matter-of-fact, not frightened. "But it's true. She said she waited a long time." Mrs. Carlton knelt there, frozen between disbelief and dread. There was no way Eli could have known the details. Not about the shed, not about Rex, not about the shoe or the locket. The police hadn't released any information. She forced a calm smile. "Can I keep your drawing for a bit?" Eli shrugged. "Okay." She took it carefully, as though it might crumble in her hands, and slipped it into a folder. Then she rose, moving to her desk with shaking fingers. Her eyes drifted toward the window, toward the far end of the playground, where police tape still shimmered in the distance. Outside, the world looked normal again. But something had shifted. The air carried a weight, the kind that only truth brings when it starts clawing its way to the surface. When the final bell rang, Eli stayed behind to pack his crayons. He looked up once more, toward the window, where the reflection of the playground flickered faintly in the glass. For a second, he thought he saw a little girl standing there, hair tied in ribbons, smiling softly. Then she was gone. Mrs. Carlton watched him leave, her hand unconsciously brushing the folder on her desk. The drawing inside felt like it pulsed, like the graphite itself was breathing. Outside, Rex stood with Officer Lewis by the patrol car. The dog's eyes were fixed on the same patch of ground he'd unearthed. His ears twitched, tail still. Then, without warning, he let out one soft, low bark, almost a whisper. Mrs. Carlton heard it through the open window, and for reasons she couldn't explain, it made her eyes fill with tears, because somehow, in that small, haunting sound, she felt what everyone in Riverside had begun to feel again. The stir of something lost, something pleading. Not for justice yet. Just for someone to finally listen. Detective Caleb Monroe arrived at Riverside Elementary just as the last of the forensics team was packing up. The playground, once filled with children's laughter, now looked like the set of a ghost story. Yellow tape fluttering like ribbons of regret, dirt mounded in uneven piles where Rex had dug. The late afternoon sun threw long, tired shadows over everything. Monroe stood at the edge of the field, hands buried in the pockets of his worn gray coat, his jaw set tight. His eyes, pale and distant, scanned the scene without speaking. He'd seen this kind of stillness before. The kind that lingered after tragedy had already had its say. Officer Lewis spotted him and nodded. "Detective, appreciate you coming out." Monroe stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. "Heard about the shoe," he said quietly. "Pink, butterfly sticker, size, what, 12? Lewis blinked. "Yeah. How'd you—" Monroe exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because I remember the case." His voice dropped lower. "Sophie Lane, 7 years ago. Same school. Same corner of the grounds." He looked down at the evidence markers still dotting the dirt, then crouched, running a gloved hand just above the disturbed soil. "We searched this place back then. Dogs, cadaver units, drones, the whole 9 yards. We found nothing." Lewis's expression faltered. "Then how—" Monroe straightened slowly. "Because someone didn't want us to." He turned toward the forensics van where the evidence was being logged. "The shoe matches the one listed in her case file. And that locket?" He hesitated, his tone gentling. "It was a birthday gift from her mother. I read the report too many times not to remember." For a moment, neither man spoke. The hum of the generator filled the silence. Finally, Monroe said, "I need to talk to anyone who worked here at the time. Teachers, maintenance, security." Lewis nodded. "Most of the old staff are gone. Retired, transferred. But there's one guy, Henry Dalton. Used to be the janitor. Lives out, on the east side. He's the one who found the girl's backpack back in 2010. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "He's still in town?" "Yeah. Barely gets out these days. You think he remembers something?" Monroe's voice hardened. "If he doesn't, I'll make him try." Henry Dalton's house sat on the outskirts of Riverside, a sagging single story wrapped in peeling paint and overgrown grass. The porch light flickered like it was too tired to shine. Monroe parked by the curb and sat in silence for a moment, watching the house through the windshield. The sun had already dipped below the trees, and the shadows pooled thick across the yard. He finally stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. The air smelled faintly of rain and rust. He knocked. A long pause, then a slow shuffle of feet inside. The door creaked open an inch. Henry Dalton looked older than his years. Gray hair and wild tufts, eyes watery and rimmed in red. His flannel shirt hung loose over a frail frame. When he saw the badge, he sighed softly. "I knew someone would come sooner or later," he said. "Didn't think it'd take this long." Monroe held out his credentials. "Detective Monroe. Mind if I come in?" Dalton hesitated, then nodded. "Can't stop you from doing your job." Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust, old coffee, and loneliness. The walls were cluttered with faded photographs, students in class photos, handwritten thank you notes, a few dog-eared newspaper clippings about community cleanups. A life built around a school that no longer remembered him. Monroe took a seat across from him at a small kitchen table. A single bulb buzzed overhead. "You worked at Riverside when Sophie Lane disappeared," Monroe began. Dalton nodded slowly. "Custodian. 23 years. Retired after she went missing. Couldn't walk those halls anymore." Monroe pulled a notepad from his coat. "Tell me about that day." The old man rubbed his palms together, his voice raspy. "It was a Friday. Warm, early spring. Kids had just gone out for recess. I was fixing a leak in the boys' bathroom when I saw him." Monroe leaned forward. "Him?" Dalton nodded again. "Tall guy. Didn't look like staff. Said he was from the district's IT department. Came to check the security cameras. Had a badge. Clipboard. Smelled like peppermint. Strong, too." Did he give a name? Dalton shook his head. No, just smiled and said, "Don't worry, old-timer. I'll handle it." Monroe scribbled notes quickly. "Where did you see him?" "By the shed near the back fence. That's where the main cable line used to run. He was unlocking the maintenance box." "You saw his keys?" Dalton's eyes grew distant. "Yeah. Big ring. Metal jingling. He had them looped around his finger. The sound still haunts me. That jingle." Monroe's tone softened. "What happened next?" Dalton's throat worked as he swallowed, hard. Couple hours later, the girl was gone. Cameras went dark. Footage wiped clean. He was gone too. I told the police what I saw, but he trailed off, looking down at his hands. They thought I was confused. Said no one from IT was scheduled. Said I must have mixed up the dates. His voice broke, trembling. "But I heard her. I swear it." Monroe froze. "Heard who?" Dalton's eyes glistened. "Sophie. I was in the boiler room when I heard a scream. Faint, but real. Came from outside. By the shed." Monroe's pen stopped moving. "I ran out there," Dalton continued, voice shaking. "Didn't see anyone, but the shed door was open. I told the principal, but no one believed me. They said I was making excuses, that I was just a lonely old man who saw ghosts where there weren't any." He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "But I know what I heard. She screamed, and then there was silence." The clock on the wall ticked loudly between them. Monroe's voice came low, steady. "Henry, why didn't you insist harder? Go to the police again?" The old man laughed bitterly, a sound hollow as wind in an empty hall. "Because people only listen when it's too late." Tears welled in his eyes. His shoulders began to shake. "I heard her scream," he whispered again, choking on the words. "I heard her scream, and no one believed me." Monroe felt something shift inside him. That old, familiar ache that came with every unsolved case. He reached out, placing a steady hand over Henry's trembling one. "You're being heard now," he said quietly. "And this time, we're not stopping." Henry looked up, eyes red and glistening. "You really think she's still out there?" Monroe hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "No, but I think she deserves the truth." He stood, sliding his notebook back into his coat. "One more thing," he said at the door. "If you remember anything else about that man, anything, you call me." Dalton nodded weakly. "You'll find him, won't you?" Monroe's jaw tightened. "I'll try." As he stepped outside, the night air hit him like cold water. The street was empty, quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the faint jingle of something metallic, wind pushing a stray set of keys on a forgotten hook by the door. Monroe turned, staring at them. A chill crawled down his spine. He took out his phone and dialed. "This is Detective Monroe. Reopen case number 2017-0417, the Sophie Lane disappearance, and get the bureau on standby." He hung up, standing alone under the flickering porch light. The world around him was silent, but somewhere deep in the dark, a story that had been buried for 7 years had just begun to breathe again. The next morning, Riverside Elementary looked almost normal again. Almost. The yellow tape had been removed before sunrise, the press vans gone, the playground restored to its usual hum of chatter and clattering lunchboxes. But something in the air was different. The laughter didn't reach as high. The breeze didn't carry as far. Even the sun felt cautious, as if afraid to shine too brightly on the ground that had betrayed its secret. Inside classroom 2B, the smell of crayons and old paper couldn't hide the tension. The children sat quieter than usual, coloring in silence, while Mrs. Carleton tried to hold her composure behind a soft smile. She had slept maybe 3 hours, haunted by the memory of Eli's first drawing. The shed, the tall man with keys, the words he whispered. She told me. Now, as she walked between desks, her gaze caught Eli again. He sat at the back of the room, shoulders hunched, head bowed, the same stillness that didn't belong to an 8-year-old. His pencil moved in slow, deliberate strokes, scraping softly against the paper. When she came closer, she froze. This wasn't the kind of drawing a child should make. The page was filled with dark, thick lines, layers of soil and shadow. Beneath it, the faint outline of a girl lay curled up, eyes closed, her hair spreading like roots through the dirt. From above, a thin beam of light sliced through a crack in the ground, reaching down toward her small hand. And at the surface, drawn in sharp, trembling detail, was Rex, head tilted back, barking toward the sky. Mrs. Carleton's voice came out quieter than she intended. "Eli, what are you drawing?" He didn't look up. "It's her again." Her heart skipped. "Sophie?" He nodded, still sketching. "She says it's dark, but she can hear him." Mrs. Carleton blinked, barely breathing. "Hear who?" "The dog," he whispered. "He's trying to wake her up." The air seemed to thicken around them. A few of the other children turned to glance over, sensing something strange in the teacher's tone. Mrs. Carleton smiled weakly, motioning for them to return to their work. Then she crouched beside Eli's desk, lowering her voice. "Eli, honey, when did she tell you that?" He stopped drawing for the first time. His pencil hovered mid-air. "Last night." "In a dream?" she asked gently. He shook his head, eyes still fixed on the paper. "No, I heard her. She was whispering from under the floor. She said she's cold, but the dog makes her feel warm." Mrs. Carleton felt her skin prickle. She tried to steady her voice. "Eli, how do you know what the ground looks like under the shed?" He looked up finally, his eyes wide, earnest, far too old for his years. "Because she showed me." Something inside Mrs. Carleton snapped between fear and heartbreak. She touched his shoulder softly. "Eli, can I keep this drawing?" He hesitated. "It's for the dog," he murmured. She said he'd understand. Mrs. Carleton nodded. "I'll make sure he does." That afternoon, she drove to the precinct with the drawing folded neatly inside a manila envelope. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her pulse racing faster the closer she got. The logical part of her brain told her it was just coincidence, a child's imagination twisting the chaos adults had caused. But the motherly part, the one that had felt Sophie's absence for years, knew better. Detective Caleb Monroe met her in the lobby. He looked as though he hadn't slept either. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, the lines beneath his eyes deeper than the day before. "Mrs. Carleton," he greeted, voice gravelly. "You said it was urgent." She nodded, handing him the envelope. "You need to see this." He opened it, pulling out the sheet of paper. His brow furrowed as he studied the drawing. "What am I looking at?" Mrs. Carleton took a shaky breath. "That's the shed, the ground beneath it. And that's Rex." Monroe frowned. "You think the kid overheard something from the news?" "No," she said firmly. "The shape of the floorboards, those patterns. Only someone who's seen the inside of that shed could know that. And this." She pointed to a faint square Eli had drawn near the corner. "That's where the ground dips. The forensics team said they'd only noticed it last night. It wasn't public." Monroe's hand stilled over the page. He looked up sharply. "How could he?" "He couldn't," she interrupted. unless someone, or something, told him. For a long time, the detective didn't speak. The clock ticked softly between them. Finally, he folded the paper again and slipped it into his jacket. "Where's the boy now?" "At home," she said, "with his mother. I didn't want to scare him." Monroe exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing." He turned toward the door. "And if that dog's still uneasy, I want to see why." That night, under the thin silver light of the moon, Rex returned to the playground. The air was cold, still, carrying only the faint hum of cicadas. Officer Lewis held the leash loosely, letting the dog lead. Rex's paws pressed into the same earth he had clawed days ago. He sniffed once, twice, then growled, low and deep. "Find it, boy," Lewis whispered. Rex moved to the shed, nose to the ground. He circled twice, then stopped. His body stiffened. He began pawing again. Same spot, same dirt. Lewis radioed in quietly. "This is Unit K94. He's reacting again. I think we missed something." Within an hour, Monroe arrived with a small forensic crew. They worked under portable lights, careful not to disturb more than necessary. The silence was thick, broken only by the scrape of shovels and the steady rhythm of Rex's breathing. Then one of the techs paused. "Detective, you might want to see this." From the shallow pit, a metal glint surfaced, a rusted box, edges corroded, half fused to the soil. Monroe crouched beside it. The padlock had long disintegrated, but when he pried it open, the contents inside still carried the weight of time. Inside lay a bundle of broken keys, a laminated visitor's badge, and a photograph. Bent, faded, but unmistakable. Monroe lifted it carefully. The man in the photo was smiling stiffly beside a white maintenance van. Brown hair, thin frame, and around his finger, a ring of keys gleamed faintly. Henry Dalton's words echoed in Monroe's head. He smelled like peppermint. Said he was from the IT department. Keys jingling. Lewis leaned in. "That's him, isn't it?" Monroe's throat tightened. "Yeah." He held the photo toward the floodlight, studying the man's eyes. Calm, ordinary, empty in the way predators often are. The night air felt colder now. Rex sat beside him, tail still, eyes locked on the box, as if he understood exactly what they had found. He gave one quiet bark, short, certain, final. Monroe looked down at him. "You did good, partner." The detective turned toward the field where the children would play again soon. To everyone else, it was just dirt. But to him, it felt alive. A graveyard of secrets starting to stir. For 7 years, the truth had been buried beneath lies, paperwork, and silence. Now it had a face. And somewhere, that face was still walking free. Detective Caleb Monroe had seen paper trails vanish before. Crooked landlords, phantom charities, fake IDs. But this one felt different. It didn't just vanish. It had been erased with purpose. He sat in his office long after midnight, surrounded by the cold glow of computer monitors. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and old carpet. On his screen, a scanned copy of the visitor badge found in the rusted box flickered under harsh fluorescent light. The name printed in washed-out ink read, Aaron Pierce. No company, no department, just 2 words and a lie. Monroe leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered. A soft chime sounded, a reply from the county records database. He clicked it open. No results, no business license, no tax ID, no known employee by that name in the district. He ran the badge number again, cross-referencing it through the National Contractor Registry. The same answer blinked back in sterile white letters. No match found. He frowned, then opened a separate folder marked Riverside Maintenance Bids, 2017. Hundreds of scanned documents filled the screen, each labeled by year and vendor. He filtered through them, eyes narrowing, until one stood out. Blue Vista Systems. The company name looked legitimate, polished letterhead, professional font, but the more Monroe read, the stranger it became. The company had been hired as a temporary IT contractor for camera system repairs, just weeks before Sophie Lane disappeared. He clicked the signature block at the bottom. Authorized by A. Pierce. Monroe froze. He stared at the screen, heart drumming slow and heavy. The signature was small but confident. The letters connected, practiced. Whoever this man was, he'd been here before. He checked the address, listed, 1225 Maple Row, Atlanta. A quick search pulled up a vacant lot, overgrown and abandoned. No structure, no business, no record of anything existing there for at least a decade. He clicked deeper. The EIN number was invalid. The phone number connected to a prepaid burner that had been deactivated in 2018. The listed email bounced back as undeliverable. A ghost company. Monroe leaned forward, muttering under his breath, "You built this whole thing just to walk through the door." He opened the regional school database. Blue Vista Systems had contracts with 4 other schools across Georgia and Alabama. All short-term, all within a 2-year window. One of them, a small elementary in Macon, had an open police record. Missing child, age 6. Case unsolved. He exhaled slowly, staring at the pattern emerging like cracks in glass. It wasn't just Riverside. This man had been moving, watching, hunting. He printed the page, the printer humming in the quiet. Each sheet slid out like a confession. Monroe's phone buzzed suddenly, shattering the silence. "Lewis," he answered quickly. "Yeah? You sitting down?" Lewis's voice was low, uneasy. "Talk to me." "That kid, Eli. His mom just called. He woke up screaming, said, 'He's coming back.'" Monroe straightened. "What do you mean coming back? Who?" Lewis hesitated. "The boy said, 'The man with the keys. He lost something.'" Monroe's chest went tight. "Lost what?" She couldn't get him to say. He just kept crying, said the man was angry, said he wants it back. Monroe rubbed his jaw, eyes darting to the photo pinned to his wall, the faded picture of the smiling man beside the van. "Tell her to keep Eli close tonight. Lock the doors. Double-check the windows." "Already did," Lewis replied. "But there's more. Rex, he's acting strange again." Monroe's brow furrowed. "Strange how?" "He won't sleep. Keeps pacing near the door, growling, ears up like he's waiting for something." Monroe's eyes flicked to the clock, 1:43 a.m. "Keep your radio on," he said. "If he's reacting, there's a reason." Across town, the Lane family home sat quiet, bathed in moonlight. Inside, Eli Carter whimpered in his sleep, tangled in blankets. His mother, Claire, rushed in, kneeling beside him. "Eli, honey, wake up." His eyes flew open, wet with tears. "He's coming back." "Who?" she asked, stroking his hair. "The man with the keys." His small voice quivered. "He's mad." Claire swallowed. "Mad about what?" Eli shook his head violently. "He lost something important. He said the dog took it. He wants it back." Her blood ran cold. "Eli, how do you know that?" He looked past her toward the window. "Because he told me." 2 miles away, Officer Lewis parked by the edge of Riverside Elementary. The building loomed in pale light, the playground quiet under the glow of street lamps. Rex sat in the passenger seat, eyes fixed out the window, muscles taut. Lewis sighed, scratching the dog's neck. "What's got you riled up, partner?" Rex's ears twitched. Then, without warning, he growled, low and steady, chest rumbling like thunder before a storm. Lewis froze, Rex? The German shepherd turned toward the gate, fur standing along his spine. His growl deepened. Lewis followed his gaze. Across the street, under a broken streetlight, a figure stood, hooded, motionless, half hidden in the shadows. Son of a... Lewis reached for his flashlight, stepping out of the cruiser. Police, show me your hands! The figure didn't move. Lewis aimed the beam. The light caught the edge of the man's jaw, a flash of pale skin, then the glint of something metallic, a keyring, swinging slightly from his hand. Don't move! But before Lewis could take another step, the man turned and bolted down the street. Dispatch, this is Unit K94, Lewis shouted into his radio. Possible suspect, male, 6 foot, 2 gray hoodie, moving east on Fairview Road. Rex lunged forward, barking ferociously, the sound splitting the night open. Lewis unclipped his leash. Go! The dog exploded into motion, paws striking pavement like gunfire. The man vanished between the trees at the end of the block, his footsteps fading into the dark. Rex chased him to the edge of the woods, barking wildly before stopping, ears high, tail stiff. He stood there, nose twitching, eyes locked on the tree line. Lewis caught up, chest heaving. You got his scent? Rex growled softly, nose pressed to the ground, but the trail ended at the drainage ditch. The man had disappeared, as if swallowed by the night. Lewis called it in, but the radio crackled with static. Somewhere between the interference, he heard Monroe's voice. Don't lose him, Lewis. He's real. He's been hiding in plain sight for years. Lewis looked back toward the dark street. The only sound now was the wind through the trees, and the faint metallic jingling that seemed to echo long after the man was gone. He whispered, He's not a ghost anymore. Rex stood beside him, still staring at the spot where the figure had vanished, growl fading into a whine that sounded almost like grief. In the distance, the streetlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely. And for the first time since Sophie Lane's name returned to the town, Riverside realized the nightmare hadn't ended. It had come back. The evidence lab was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights sounded like a heartbeat in an empty room. Dust motes drifted through the pale air, turning slowly in the shafts of light from the security lamps. Detective Caleb Monroe stood behind the glass observation window, his tie loosened, the weight of sleepless nights clinging to his shoulders. On the stainless steel table inside the lab lay the silver locket they had found beside the buried shoe, cleaned, polished, and waiting. The chain was fragile, kinked in places, the clasp half-rusted shut. But the heart-shaped pendant itself gleamed faintly under the light, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. 2 forensic technicians in latex gloves bent over it. We're ready, Detective, said Dr. Yara Singh, head of evidence analysis. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed something else. Unease. The structure's hollow. There's a hidden panel behind the photo slot. Someone sealed it deliberately. Monroe nodded. Open it. Yara slid a thin tool under the backing. The tiny hinge gave with a soft, metallic click. A hidden compartment, a space no larger than a thumbnail, was revealed. She tilted it slightly, and something small and black slipped into her palm. A micro SD card. For a second, nobody breathed. Jesus, whispered one of the lab assistants. That thing's been buried for 7 years. Yara placed the card carefully into an evidence dish. It's fragile but intact. She glanced up at Monroe. You want to see what's on it? Monroe's pulse thudded in his ears. Play it. The technician inserted the card into a laptop connected to the projector. The screen flickered to life, flooding the room with pale light. At first, only static. Grainy, gray, disjointed pixels crawling across the screen like snow. Then, slowly, an image began to form, A small, dimly lit room. Cement walls, no windows, a flickering bulb dangling from a cord. In the corner, a child sat on the floor, knees to chest, face streaked with dirt and tears. She wore a blue t-shirt with a faded cartoon sun on it. Her eyes, large, frightened, pleading, stared directly into the camera. Monroe's throat tightened. My God. The tech adjusted the feed, clearing the frame. The image sharpened just enough for the name tag pinned to the child's shirt to come into focus. Sophie. She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Her voice trembled when she spoke, barely a whisper. Please, I want to go home. The room fell silent. No one moved. Then, from off-screen, came the faint squeak of rubber soles on concrete. A man's voice, low and calm, answered, You will, sweetheart, after we finish our game. A figure stepped into view. The camera adjusted automatically, refocusing on him. He wore a gray-collared shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and sneakers with blue lightning bolts on the settings. His hands moved methodically, adjusting something near the camera. He turned, just slightly, and for a brief, chilling moment, his face filled the frame. Clean-shaven, brown hair, a faint scar near his jaw. His mouth twisted into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Aaron Pierce. No question, no doubt. Every muscle in Monroe's body locked in place. He'd spent years staring at faceless evil through files, sketches, and case reports. But this was different. This was a living, breathing monster looking right back at him through the screen. The sound of heavy breathing filled the lab. Dr. Yara whispered, It's him. Monroe didn't answer. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. On the video, Sophie flinched as Pierce crouched beside her. He brushed dirt from her sleeve with unsettling gentleness. Why are you crying? He asked softly. You said you wanted to draw. I brought you colors. He set down a box of crayons beside her. His voice turned sharper. Don't make me remind you how to behave. Sophie's voice broke. I want my mom. Pierce smiled again. Slow, mechanical. Mommies lie, sweetheart. But I don't. The camera trembled slightly, his hand brushing against it as he stood. The video cut to static, then back to black. The tech froze the frame. No one moved. Outside the glass, Monroe's reflection stared back at him. Gray, hollow, trembling. In the silence that followed, Mrs. Carlton appeared at the door, having arrived moments earlier after Monroe's request to review old staff rosters. She'd caught the last seconds of the footage. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, my God. She staggered back, eyes glassy with shock. The sound of her body hitting the floor was soft but heavy. Mrs. Carlton! One of the officers rushed to her side, easing her into a chair. Monroe tore his eyes from the screen long enough to whisper, Get her water. He turned back to the flickering image, the frozen still of Sophie's face. She looked directly at the camera, eyes wide, tearful, as if she'd known that one day someone would finally watch. Monroe swallowed hard, voice low. We found her voice. Yara blinked away tears. Detective, this video's timestamp. It's dated April 17th, 2017, the exact day she disappeared. Monroe's world tilted slightly. He reached for the table, steadying himself. Where was this filmed? He asked hoarsely. We can't be sure yet, she said. There's no GPS metadata, no file headers. Whoever did this knew how to erase traces. But there's an audio hum, a low-frequency signal. Sounds like a ventilation system. Industrial. Monroe's brow furrowed. Like a basement. Or maintenance tunnels. Yara nodded grimly. Exactly. He stared at the static-filled screen again, watching the faint outline of Sophie's tear-streaked face fade into snow. "She tried to tell us," he whispered. "All these years, she's been trying." Behind him, the lab's heavy door clicked open. Rex stood in the hallway, leash slack in Officer Lewis's hand. The German shepherd tilted his head, ears forward. His body was tense, alert, as if the air itself had changed. Lewis frowned. He started whining outside, wouldn't stop. "What's going on in there?" Before Monroe could answer, Rex let out a single sharp bark, short, deliberate, cutting through the silence like a crack of thunder. Every head turned. The sound carried through the lab, echoing against the glass and metal. It was as if he'd understood the gravity of what they'd found, like he was answering Sophie himself. Yara whispered, "He knows." Monroe looked at the dog, voice barely audible. "Yeah," he said. "He always did." He turned back to the screen, watching the frozen frame one last time. The truth they had uncovered was unbearable, yes, but for the first time since the case began, the silence that had haunted Riverside was broken. Sophie Lane's voice had been found, and it was louder than the dark that had buried her. Morning at Riverside Elementary arrived heavy and gray, as if the sky itself hesitated to shine on the ground that had begun to remember. Custodian Miguel Herrera was trimming weeds near the back fence when his shovel struck something buried shallow beneath the soil. At first, he thought it was just another piece of forgotten trash, until he noticed the edges. A plastic bag, folded and sealed, smeared with mud. He pulled it free carefully, shaking off the dirt. Inside there was only a single piece of paper. The ink had bled slightly, but the words were still visible, scrawled in sharp, uneven handwriting. "Tell the dog to stay out of my business." Miguel froze. His fingers went cold. He didn't understand at first. Not really. But the message carried something unmistakable. A presence. A promise. Within 20 minutes, the school was swarming again. Detective Caleb Monroe stood beside Officer Lewis at the back fence, the note sealed now in an evidence bag. Lewis read it again, voice low. "You think this is a threat?" Monroe's gaze was distant, hard. "No," he said. "It's a warning." Rex paced nearby, the chain on his collar rattling softly. His ears were pinned forward, nose twitching toward the trees beyond the playground. Lewis followed his stare. The woods loomed only 30 yards away. Dense, quiet, and somehow watching back. Monroe turned toward the principal's office. "Lock the campus down. Quietly. No alarms, no panic. Call it a safety drill. And nobody, I mean nobody, leaves until I say so." Principal Hammond nodded, his face pale. By mid-morning, the routine of school life had collapsed into a fragile performance. The intercom chimed gently. "Attention, students and staff. We'll be having a brief safety drill today. Please remain in your classrooms." Teachers nodded to each other, pretending not to be scared. Doors clicked shut. Blinds drew halfway. In classroom 2B, Mrs. Carlton tried to keep her voice calm as she guided the students into their quiet corner. Crayons rolled off desks. Papers fluttered. Eli Carter, however, wasn't afraid. He sat cross-legged by the window, staring out toward the playground, his sketchpad open on his lap. "Eli, sweetheart," Mrs. Carlton whispered, "you need to stay quiet with the others." He looked up at her, calm and steady. "It's okay, Mrs. Carlton. She's not afraid anymore." The words cut through her composure. "Who isn't?" He smiled faintly. "Sophie, because the dog is here." Mrs. Carlton's hands trembled. "Eli, what do you mean?" "She said he found her voice," he replied softly, eyes still on the window. "Now she's helping him listen." Before Mrs. Carlton could respond, the PA system crackled again. All staff, please remain in rooms until further notice. Her breath hitched. The way the voice wavered on further notice told her the truth. This wasn't just a drill. Outside, Monroe walked the perimeter with Lewis. The wind had picked up, carrying the faint metallic rattle of the fence. Rex tugged lightly on his leash, moving with intent, sniffing, pausing, pulling again. He led them to the far corner, near where the note had been buried. The earth there looked disturbed, softer than the rest. Someone was here recently, Monroe said quietly. Last night, maybe early morning. Lewis scanned the tree line. How's he even getting this close? We've had patrols. Because he's smart, Monroe muttered, and because he's done this before. Rex suddenly let out a low growl, the fur along his back bristling. His body went rigid, muscles tense, eyes fixed on something beyond the fence. Lewis turned. What is it, boy? But there was nothing. Only shadows, branches swaying, and the hollow stillness of an empty field. Monroe felt it, though. That subtle shift in air, that unspoken awareness. He's here, he whispered. He's watching us. The dog barked once, sharp and guttural, echoing off the trees. Then, as if satisfied, he fell silent again, sitting back on his haunches, head tilted. By noon, the lockdown lifted. Parents were told there had been a minor security precaution. Children went home early, some laughing, others clinging to their mothers. The illusion of safety returned, but only on the surface. That night, the rain came. Slow at first, then heavy, streaking down windshields and pooling in gutters. Monroe's headlights cut through the downpour as he pulled up to Henry Dalton's house once again. The porch light was still broken. The old man answered after several knocks, wrapped in a threadbare robe. I told you I didn't have anything else, Henry said wearily, stepping aside. Monroe entered, shaking off his coat. Something happened today. I think he's back. Henry froze. He? Monroe handed him a photo, the same rusted badge and name they'd uncovered. Aaron Pierce, Blue Vista Systems. You remember that name? The old man studied it, eyes narrowing. His lip quivered slightly. No, but... He hesitated, gripping the edge of the table. I remember the sound. Monroe frowned. What sound? The keys, Henry whispered. He was never fixing cameras. He was watching them. The words landed like a stone thrown into dark water, ripples of dread spreading through the room. Monroe leaned forward. Explain. Henry's breathing grew shallow. The week before Sophie disappeared, I noticed something strange. The cameras in the hallway. They weren't just recording the playground. They were turned inward, toward the classrooms, toward the kids. He wiped his shaking hands on his robe. I thought it was maintenance work, but now I know. He was using the system to watch them, all of them. Monroe's stomach knotted. So he had access to live feeds. He could see her. Henry nodded. Every move she made. The rain battered the roof, thunder low and distant. Monroe rubbed a hand over his face. He's taunting us. That note at the fence, he wants us to know he's close. Wants the dog to stop because the dog's the only one who can smell him. Henry looked up, eyes wide with fear. You think he'll come here? Monroe shook his head, though he didn't believe it. He won't risk it. Not yet. The old man swallowed hard. You don't understand, Detective. People like him don't run. They circle. They wait for the right moment. Monroe stared at the window, rain streaking down the glass like veins of mercury. In the reflection, he could see his own face, tired, drawn, and behind it, a faint outline of movement outside. He spun, hand on his weapon, but the yard was empty. Still, He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching, listening. Henry's voice broke through the silence, small and hoarse. "It's starting again, isn't it?" Monroe met his eyes. "No," he said quietly, though the lie burned his tongue. "It's ending." But as he stepped back into the storm, Rex's bark echoed from the patrol car. Low, urgent, warning. And somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the rain and the reach of light, a set of keys jingled once, softly. Then were gone. Fog hung over Riverside Elementary, like a veil that morning. Heavy, unmoving. The kind that swallowed sound and blurred the world into shades of gray. The playground was empty, silent except for the steady rhythm of Rex's paws pressing into wet earth. His breath puffed in small clouds, tail low, movements deliberate. Detective Caleb Monroe and Officer Lewis followed close behind, boots sinking into the dew-soaked grass. The air smelled of rust, rain, and something older, the scent of decay clinging to memory. Rex moved in a straight line, nose to the ground, from the maintenance shed toward the far edge of the staff parking lot. Not circling, not sniffing idly, tracking. Monroe's voice was low. "He's not searching. He's retracing." Lewis frowned. "Retracing what?" Monroe stopped, eyes narrowing through the fog. "His escape route." For a moment the only sound was the distant hum of the highway and Rex's claws against the dirt. Then the dog stopped, completely still, his gaze fixed on a small patch of ground near the chain-link fence. His ears twitched. He gave one low growl, then started pawing. Lewis knelt. "Same spot as before?" Monroe nodded. "No, farther east, about 20 yards off the first dig site." Rex's claws tore through damp soil, flinging clumps behind him. Within seconds, the metallic tap of something buried rang out. Lewis leaned closer, squinting. "He's found something again." Monroe keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Detective Monroe. We need ground-penetrating radar at Riverside Elementary, south perimeter, by the staff lot, marking as high priority." Static answered, then a voice. "Copy that, unit en route." Rex sat back, panting softly, tail twitching, eyes never leaving the disturbed ground. 2 hours later, the forensic van arrived. Portable lights cut through the fog as the radar techs began scanning the area. Monroe stood off to the side, hands in his coat pockets, watching the monitor flicker in real time. "Detective," one of the technicians called, pointing at the screen. "We've got an anomaly, about a foot deep, metallic density, roughly the size of a small box. Dig it up." They worked carefully, shovels slicing through the wet soil until a dull clank echoed in the air. The technician knelt, brushing dirt aside to reveal another rusted metal container, nearly identical to the one they'd unearthed days ago. Lewis crouched beside him. "Déjà vu." Monroe's jaw tightened. "Open it." The latch broke easily under pressure. Inside, a single visitor badge sat atop folded paper. The badge, laminated and aged, bore the same name, Aaron Pierce, but with a different title beneath it. Field Technician, Wisp Solutions. Lewis exhaled. He used multiple companies. Monroe unfolded the paper carefully. It was a map, creased and smudged, marked with small red circles. At first glance, they looked random. Then he recognized the names printed beside them. Riverside Elementary, Havenbrook Academy, Southfield Charter, Macon Elementary, 4 schools, 4 unsolved disappearances. "Jesus," Lewis whispered. "He planned it all." Monroe stared at the circles, the ink smeared where water had touched it. "No," he murmured. "He didn't plan it. He cataloged it. A record. A collection." Lewis looked up at him. "So what now?" Monroe's voice hardened. "Now we stop treating this like history. He's not a ghost. He's active." Rex barked suddenly, a sharp warning that made everyone flinch. The dog's gaze shot back toward the shed. Monroe turned. "What is it, boy?" Rex paced once, then froze, staring at the open doorway of the shed. Dark, empty, its interior swallowing the light from the portable lamps. Monroe's pulse quickened. He motioned for Lewis. "Flashlight." They stepped forward together, beams cutting through dust and cobwebs. The shed smelled of oil, wood rot, and something faintly chemical. Nothing moved. But on the back wall, scratched faintly into the paneling, were letters, uneven, carved with something sharp. "I see you," Lewis swore under his breath. "He's been back here." Monroe stared at the words until his stomach turned. "No," he said softly. "He never left." That night, across town, Eli Carter awoke screaming. His mother burst into his room, flipping on the lamp. "Eli, baby, what's wrong?" He was sitting upright, trembling, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. His eyes were wide, unfocused. "She said it again," he gasped. Claire clutched his shoulders. "Who said what?" "Sophie," he cried. "She says he's coming for the necklace." Claire froze. "The necklace?" Eli nodded frantically. "She said he wants it back. He's angry because it's his secret." Before she could respond, he buried his face against her, sobbing. "Don't let him in, Mom. Don't let him in." Half an hour later, Monroe's phone buzzed. He answered groggily. "Monroe." It was Claire Carter, panicked, breathless. "Detective, I'm sorry to call, but Eli had another dream. He said the man is coming for the locket, the one you found with Sophie's things." Monroe sat up straight. "What do you mean coming for it?" "He said it belongs to him, that he hid something inside. Please, what does that mean?" Monroe didn't answer. His mind was already racing. He threw on his coat, grabbed his keys, and bolted for the car. The streets were slick with rain as he sped toward the forensic evidence lab, wipers slapping rhythmically against the windshield. He called ahead. "This is Detective Monroe. I need immediate access to the evidence vault. Code 417. The guard hesitated. "Everything okay, sir?" "No," Monroe said flatly. "It's not." When he arrived, the lab was mostly empty, the hum of refrigeration units and distant thunder filling the air. The evidence clerk, Dana, met him at the vault door, keycard trembling in her hand. "You said it was urgent?" she asked. "The locket," Monroe said. "Where is it?" Dana frowned, typing quickly into her terminal. "Let's see. Inventory ID 318A. Chain. Silver heart locket. Recovered from crime scene 2. It should be..." She froze. Monroe stepped closer. "Should be what?" She turned the monitor toward him. The entry line blinked red. Status. Missing. Monroe's chest tightened. "What do you mean missing?" "It was under restricted evidence." Dana shook her head, voice trembling. "It was logged for transfer this afternoon, but there's no signature. No request. No record of who authorized it." He felt the world tilt beneath him. "Run the camera footage." She pulled up the file. The playback loaded, then glitched, skipping several seconds. When the feed returned, the shelf where the locket had been stored was empty. "Timestamp?" 2200 hours, Dana said. "Just before we closed." Monroe looked at the blank space on the monitor, his own reflection staring back at him. He whispered, "He was here." By dawn, alarms rang through every department in the region. The missing evidence triggered a cascade of alerts. The FBI liaison notified. The local police mobilized. The media quietly instructed to hold coverage. But none of that mattered to Monroe as he stood in the lab doorway, Rex at his side. The dog's ears were rigid, nose pointed toward the open evidence cage, growling low and steady, not out of fear, but recognition. Monroe knelt beside him. "You can smell him, can't you?" Rex's growl deepened. Monroe stared at the empty shelf one last time. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not a case anymore." He stood, jaw tight, rain dripping from his coat as he walked toward the exit. "It's a war." The sky over Riverside was the color of ash when Agent Grace Mallory stepped out of her unmarked SUV. Her coat billowed in the cold wind as she surveyed the school building through mirrored sunglasses. Quiet, neat, unaware it was about to become a war zone. Detective Caleb Monroe met her at the gate, fatigue etched into his face. "You got here fast," he said. Mallory handed him a folder. Inside were grainy images, timestamps, login pings, a digital trail. "We traced his last online activity to a public library 2 towns over. He logged in through an encrypted forum. Same alias he used to register Blue Vista Systems." Monroe's jaw tightened. "Pierce." "Yeah," she said. "He's close. Too close." She glanced toward the playground, where fog still clung to the grass. "We're putting the school under quiet lockdown. Parents will think it's a safety drill." Monroe nodded grimly. "The kids don't deserve this." "No," Mallory said, eyes cold. "But they deserve to live." By mid-morning, Riverside Elementary buzzed with restrained chaos. Plainclothes officers walked the halls in pairs, radios murmuring under their jackets. Teachers followed the drill protocol, locking doors and drawing blinds. Outside, marked units parked discreetly along the road. The playground, still damp from the night's rain, sat empty except for Rex. The German Shepherd stood alert beside Officer Lewis, his breath fogging the air, ears twitching at every sound. Monroe moved between patrol units, giving quiet orders. His phone vibrated. A text from the tech division. "Library cameras confirm Pierce left on foot. Direction: south. ETA to Riverside. 1 HR." He pocketed the phone, scanning the tree line beyond the school's fence. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves, the caw of distant crows. Lewis noticed his stare. "You think he'll really come here?" Monroe's voice was like gravel. "He's already here." Recess began at 11:15. A small group of students were allowed out under supervision. The district insisted on maintaining normalcy. Laughter rose hesitantly, like fragile glass trying not to break. Rex sat beside the basketball court, calm but watchful, eyes fixed on the delivery gate across the yard. Lewis patted his head. "Easy, boy. Just another day." But then Rex's ears flicked forward. A low growl started deep in his chest. "Rex?" The growl rose to a rumble. His eyes locked on something beyond the fence. Movement, faint but distinct. "Lewis," Monroe's voice came through the radio. "What's his status?" Before Lewis could answer, Rex lunged, leash snapping taut. His bark exploded through the yard, sharp and deafening. Children froze mid-play. Teachers turned. At the far end of the yard, by the delivery gate, a man in a gray hoodie lifted his head. For one suspended second, the world went silent. Then Monroe saw his face, unmistakable even through the fog. Aaron Pierce. "Contact! South perimeter!" Monroe shouted, sprinting forward. Pierce's eyes met his for a heartbeat. Calm, calculating, the same hollow smile captured on Sophie's video. Then he turned and bolted, vaulting the fence in one fluid motion. Rex tore free of Lewis's grip, leaping after him. "Go!" Monroe yelled. Officers scattered, radios blaring. The chase carved through the edge of town, down the service road, across the drainage ditch, into the woods that stretched behind the school like a scar. Branches whipped at Monroe's face as he ran, breath ragged. Up ahead, flashes of gray darted between the trees. Rex was a streak of muscle and fury, barking with every stride, closing the gap. Gunfire cracked. 2, maybe 3 shots. Bark splintered off tree trunks. Monroe dropped behind a fallen log, returning fire once. The echo rolled through the forest. "Pierce, drop your weapon!" he shouted. A voice answered, mocking, distant. "You never listen until it's too late!" Rex barked again, closer now. Monroe pushed forward, heart pounding. Through the mist, he saw movement. Pierce stumbling, clutching his arm. Blood dotted the leaves. The dog lunged, teeth flashing. Pierce swung a broken branch, striking Rex across the shoulder. The blow echoed like a gunshot. "Rex!" Monroe's voice cracked. The shepherd yelped but didn't stop. He lunged again, clamping onto the man's sleeve, dragging him down into the mud. Pierce kicked, thrashing. The fight was brutal, primal. Monroe burst through the undergrowth just as Pierce struck the dog again, this time with a rock. "Enough!" Monroe fired once into the air. Pierce froze, eyes wide, then bolted again, vanishing into the shadows between the pines. Rex staggered, legs trembling, a dark stain spreading across his fur. Monroe dropped beside him. "Easy, partner, easy." He pressed a hand to the wound, not deep, but bleeding fast. Rex whimpered, eyes still fixed in the direction Pierce had fled. He struggled to stand, pawing at the ground. "No," Monroe said, voice breaking. "You've done enough." But Rex didn't listen. He pulled free, limping forward, following the scent, every instinct screaming not to quit. Monroe swallowed hard, forcing himself up. "All right," he whispered. "Let's finish it together." They pushed deeper into the woods, guided by blood drops and broken branches. Finally, they found it. A backpack, half buried in the mud where Pierce had stumbled. Monroe knelt, opening it with shaking hands. Inside, a ring of keys, a portable hard drive, and dozens of photographs, each one of a child. Different towns, different schools, smiling faces unaware they were being watched. He felt the air leave his lungs. "My God," Lewis's voice crackled over the radio. "We've lost visual. Do you have him?" Monroe stared at the photos, a mosaic of innocence stolen. "No," he said quietly, "but we've got enough to bury him." Behind him, Rex swayed on his feet, panting hard. His eyes met Monroe's for a moment, bright, unwavering, defiant even in pain. Then he collapsed. "Rex!" Monroe dropped beside him again, lifting the dog's head into his lap. "Stay with me, boy. You hear me? Stay." Rex's breathing was shallow, his paw twitching weakly. Monroe pressed his forehead against the shepherd's, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. "You did it," he whispered. "You found him." The radio hissed with static, voices calling his name, but he barely heard them. "He wouldn't stop barking," Monroe said softly, his voice trembling. "Not when the world went quiet. Not when no one believed." He looked up through the canopy, the sunlight breaking through in pale golden threads. He barked loud enough for heaven to hear. Rex's tail thumped once, faint, almost imperceptible, before his body went still. Monroe held him tighter as sirens wailed in the distance, echoing through the forest like a requiem. 3 weeks later, Riverside woke to headlines that spread like wildfire across the nation. Child predator captured after decade-long investigation. Dog's nose leads to national arrest. Aaron Pierce was found in a small Florida motel, his arm still bandaged, the same wound from the chase in the woods. The evidence in his pack, the hard drive, photos, keys, tied him to 12 schools and countless families left without peace. One name appeared in every report: Rex, K-9 officer, Riverside Police Department. At Riverside Elementary, fear began to fade. Grass returned, children's laughter rose again. A week after Pierce's capture, a small ceremony was held, not for press, but for healing. Under a pale sky, folding chairs filled the playground. Parents held hands. Teachers stood in silence. Detective Caleb Monroe sat with an empty leash on his lap. Officer Lewis gripped his hat. In the front row, young Eli Carter held a small box. When the bell rang, the crowd hushed. Mrs. Carlton stepped to the podium. "I've been a teacher here for 17 years, she said. "Some children leave a mark even after they're gone." Sophie Lane was one of them. Quiet, gentle, the kind who drew butterflies in the dirt. Her voice trembled. Some voices take years to be heard. Sophie's waited. And it was a dog who found it again. A soul who refused to stop barking until the world listened. Detective Monroe joined her, opening a small black box. Inside, a gold medallion gleamed. "For the voice you gave." "This isn't for bravery," he said. "It's for a promise kept. Rex showed us duty isn't orders. It's heart." He uncovered the plaque. Rex, K-9 officer, partner protector, voice for the voiceless. The crowd rose. Some clapped, others wept. Eli knelt beside the plaque, placing a tiny silver butterfly pin beside Rex's paw print. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Mrs. Carlton asked. Eli smiled through tears. "I told him thank you." From her. Afterward, they walked to the new memorial garden. Daisies, violets, and lilies for every child once lost. At its center stood a bronze statue of Rex, head tilted, listening still. At his paws, a butterfly with spread wings. Beneath it, for those buried in silence, and the one who refused to be. As the wind whispered through the flowers, Mrs. Carlton asked softly, "Do you think he knew?" Monroe nodded. "He always knew. He just couldn't say it the way we do." She smiled faintly. "He said it louder." "Loud enough for heaven," Monroe said. That night, Monroe wrote a letter. "To Mrs. Lane, we found him, the man who took Sophie. But you should know, your daughter was never alone. The day we uncovered the truth, a friend was waiting. His name was Rex, and he barked until the silence broke. The next morning, Eli pinned a drawing by the statue, Sophie smiling beside Rex, sunlight spilling from painted clouds. "She's happy now," he whispered. The wind stirred through the garden, and faintly, from somewhere beyond, came a single bark. Not a warning, a goodbye. When stories like this end, what lingers isn't the darkness, it's the light that dogs bring into it. Rex's loyalty reminds us that love doesn't always need words. Sometimes it looks like a bark at the right moment, a paw that refuses to give up, or eyes that say, "I'm here." German shepherds, like so many faithful souls on four legs, don't just protect us, they teach us. About devotion, about courage, about what it means to stand beside someone, even in silence. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet understanding, you already know how deep that bond runs. And if you'd like to learn gentle ways to strengthen it, simple, everyday things that bring you closer, I've shared a small resource below. It's nothing fancy, just something that's helped others deepen that same trust. Take a look when the moment feels right. Your dog will feel it too.